A new podcast buying guide, the latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. At Large has published its 2022 podcast buying guide. The 5th edition focuses on brand alignment, ad quality, and the evolution of the marketplace. It's a good read for anyone getting into the medium. Vizzy, a web-based podcast enrichment platform, is looking for early adopters to use its tool. Images, chapters and links can be added to podcasts and are viewable using Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Podcast Addict and others. The Afros, an audio podcast festival, has set its date, October the 21st to the 23rd next year in Baltimore. You can put a deposit down today to be one of the first to get a ticket. Eric Johnson's Follow Friday podcast and newsletter is another casualty of Twitter's purchase by Elon Musk. I believe the era of social media as we've known it is coming to a close, Johnson says. And if you're one of the many people making the leap to Mastodon, you might be interested in MastoFeed, a tool to share new episodes of your podcast. In People News, Meghan Marcus has been appointed VP of Podcast Editorial for Paramount. She joins from CNN, CBS and NBC. And in podcast news, the Sound Off podcast has Evo Terra as a guest this week, explaining to host Matt Kundle why he's finished doing podcast pontifications and what's next for the Podcast Hall of Famer. Not content with having Joe Rogan interview Steve Jobs in its first episode, Podcast.ai is back for another, with Lex Friedman interviewing physicist Richard Feynman. And here's a fun fact for you. Friedman was just 4.5 when Feynman died in 1988. Wild Rose podcast is brand new from Yay Networks with Real Housewives of Salt Lake City star Whitney Rose. In it, Whitney speaks her mind on housewives, entrepreneurship, motherhood, spiritual wellness, leaving the Mormon church, and more. WBUR in Boston has launched The Common, a daily news and culture show hosted by Daryl C. Murphy. We link to an introduction to the show today. And True Spies returns for a new season today, and the first episode delves into the hunt for one of the most consequential and notorious figures of the turn of the millennium, Osama bin Laden. Hosted by Sophia DiMartino, you'll learn about some of the first people to flag him as a threat and those who tried to find him. If you don't get our newsletter, then you're missing out on podcast ads in the wild. There's a picture of an ad for a podcast called Eliza in Victoria Tube Station today. You'll find that at podnews.net. But that's the latest from our daily newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.